So, we're back with another laser review. For those of you used to my 3D printing content, I did say I've got a few of these to get through. Now, I initially wanted lasers on my channel for little more than having experience with the technology. I wanted this as lasers are now being added to 3D printers, so I want to see how these add-ons compare to dedicated units. However, as I've done more of these, the laser community has been incredibly welcoming and quite favourable to my everyman approach to people who are interested in this tech. We'll get to that. As for this, the Acmer P3, well, for those of you familiar with the channel, I'll say this is the laser equivalent of a Sovol SB08 FDM printer. And there's your review in a nutshell. And for those of you who have no idea what that means, stick with me. Hi, I'm Ross, and this is Fohammer Videos. Right, disclaimer time. Acmer sent me this machine for free, my thoughts are my own, I wasn't paid to make the video, but if the video was helpful and you decide to buy it, I'd appreciate you using my affiliate links in the video description before you do. I'll make a commission on that sale and it costs you nothing. And for those who want to call me a shill right now before even hearing what I've got to say about this, please add that comment and exit the video. For the rest of you who are intelligent enough to spell IQ, here we go. Immediate presentation is nice. Acmer have bothered to have branded packaging rather than a plain cardboard box. And this extends to the content. They've also provided a decently sized and somewhat decently translated manual too. And this, which is also included digitally on the included SD card, is super helpful during the unboxing and setup. The SD card also contains a solid video guide too. We'll come back to that in the most important part of the video, usage. For now, the main call out spec is that this has a decent cutting area of 400 by 390 millimeters, and this is within the area of the included honeycomb bed. Worth noting for beginners, this is a Core XY engraver, so the laser itself always points directly downwards, and the whole head moves as it does its jobs. For engraving, this is typically slower than fixed point galvo lasers, but it's much better for cutting tasks because this delivers a straight vertical cut. When it comes to lasers on this machine, there are three options to choose from: a 2-in-1 module which houses a 10-watt diode laser and a 2-watt infrared laser, then there's a dedicated 24-watt diode laser, along with a larger 48-watt diode laser, the latter of which can actually be manually switched down and become a 24-watt diode unit. So, when buying this machine, that's something you need to consider up front. I've got the 2-in-1 along with the 48-watt module, which allows me the ability to use all of the presently available power ratings. And why would you want these different units? Well, diode lasers are used for materials like wood, leather, and opaque acrylic. The higher power lasers can engrave and cut deeper and faster, but the beam diameter is a little wider. For example, the 10-watt laser is about 0.08 millimeters or 80 microns, and it's almost double that at 0.14 millimeters or 140 microns for the 48-watt laser. But this measurement of course assumes you've got a perfect focal distance, which is an important point to discuss shortly. Going back to setup, this is straightforward, and setup is simple. Just pull out all the internal foam, which encases most of the included hardware. Removing the tape and plastic covering the acrylic lid is an annoyance because this stays under every single screw. In my case, I had to remove each and every one in order to get this off, which was mildly annoying. And as far as lasers go, this is technically a budget model considering the spec and the price. And whilst the acrylic lid is clearly a budget-conscious fingerprint magnet, along with the rest of the metal housing, Acmer have done a solid enough job of making this come across as quite professional. Ports-wise, we've got a large extraction port on the back, a flexi hose and compression clamp comes with the unit. Now, I'm still waiting on a way of setting up a proper extraction vent to outside in my office workshop, so Acmer were kind enough to send me their filter box. This is an optional extra. It's a large multi-material filter in a box, and the back end of the hose clamps to the top so the big fan can suck air through the filter. However, unlike others of these I've seen, the output of this is just vents on the back of the box, where others have provided a hose outlet so you can further vent this outside, making this a pre-filter. On this device, it's got a power socket and rocker switch there on the back, and on the front there are only two controls. One adjusts the fan speed, the other is a timer up to 120 minutes. But in order to run the device, you do need to turn the timer to on and set it to a time. Going back to the machine's ports, most of the important stuff is on the right hand side near the front. You've got the main power socket for the power supply, though it is worth noting that if you do upgrade to the 48 watt laser, you do get a larger power supply unit that is backwards compatible with the smaller modules. There's also a USB-B port for connecting this to a nearby computer, with a standard USB cable included in the box. And finally, there are the ports labelled pump and hose, which both power the external air compressor and the hose connection for the air assist to allow the air in. Now there's also 3 connections on the inside of the machine which are behind the front cover on the right. One for the camera, which should already be connected to the lid mounted top-down camera, along with a micro SD card slot and connector for either of the roller accessories, which are optional extras. Personally, I'm not a fan of these sockets being inside, especially the micro SD slot, considering the amount of smoke, soot and other crap that lasers tend to kick off while they're performing jobs. Now, as for these extras, one is a rotary tool which has numerous mounting options, and the other is a conveyor feeder, which will allow you to engrave materials up to almost 2.5 meters long, which is a pretty handy expansion for some huge projects. This is something I wouldn't mind having a play with if I had either it or the space. Now, just a couple of extras that I forgot about, there's also an internal light, and to turn this on, there's a manual rocker switch on the back, along with another switch for the internal fan. On the front, we've got a couple of key safety features. A security key, and you cannot operate or even power up the machine without this inserted and turned to the on position. And then there's the e-stop, which works on this machine by cutting the power. Now, unfortunately, these don't have the best placement, as the lip of the lid is only millimeters spare when inserting the key, and the e-stop is perfectly placed to keep knocking it every time the lid is closed, at least for those of us who are right-handed. And finally, between both of these is the power button. So that's it, that's all its hardware. But what is it like to use? Well, much of this depends on where you're coming from when buying a laser. People are picking up interest in them as more devices are marketed towards the average home user. And that is who I am, who my channel is aimed at. So with that in mind, and specifically that, this one is, well, kind of in the middle, because right, so this goes a couple of ways. When it comes to the software, there's no UI on the machine, all the commands are sent to it via an external CAM controller software. Acmer have their own software, but I'll talk about LightBurn first, because when opening the manual, that's pretty much what they guide you through. Now, I honestly didn't even know they had their own software until I got much later into the review. And in truth, if you're getting this laser, you're gonna want to be using LightBurn. And I've mentioned this software in many previous videos, and it's a third-party software you need to pay for. So please check out their website and factor that in on top of the price of this machine. Yes, there's also Laser GRBL, which is freeware, but most people just suck up the price and use LightBurn. That's what most of the guides are out there for. And well, compared to some of the machines on the market, a lot of this printer's limits do come down to the integration with LightBurn itself, and in some ways just LightBurn itself. Look, I'm not here to review that software, but on the top level, this is an incredibly powerful software, incredibly, but it's also just an aged software where the UI has been built around plugging in more features over time when they've come out and they go where they fit. So when it comes to using this machine, you need to install different profiles depending on the laser head you use, perform camera calibration and follow up alignment, which I have to say is both a chore and more frustrating when I was met with numerous USB disconnects my first time through it. But that was a USB extension cable problem, I managed to sort it. But this setup basically involves moving a card full of dots around the bed and snapping pictures, and they do provide this dot card in the box. But then you have to also go through alignment to engrave markings in all 4 corners to inform the software how to compensate for the camera's optical distortion. And even after that, well, I tested it by lasering a few areas, and like pretty much every laser camera I've come across so far, the accuracy is okay, and it only really works when engraving things at low heights. As soon as you add things in there that are pretty thick, again, optical distortion comes into play and things become slightly offset. Where I found this to become frustrating is because the different laser modules are all set up in LightBurn as different devices, you need to run through this for every single laser module you have. That means 10 watt IR, 24 watt, 48 watt, because LightBurn sees them all as separate machines. But then, and I'm sure many seasoned laser professionals will look at my next comment as, yeah, that's normal, but you also need to run your own test grids on all the materials you plan to use. Now, Acmer do provide a sheet of paper with each module showing various starting points, but this is a far cry from competitors who not only provide various profiles for different materials out the box, but also have software that shows visual examples that you can just select from to get the result you want. LightBurn itself doesn't seem to support visual keys in their library module, and even if they did, Acmer haven't provided profiles. So we talk about Acmer's own software, and it's in beta, and I'll be honest, even that description is a bit of a stretch. Now, on the plus side, in this software, they do have several profiles available to get you started, but you can't seem to access these and see what any of the settings are, or create your own. And there are serious limits when loading a complex file like this Marvel Mayan calendar design. The software is painfully slow, and when it came to generating the G-code path, it took so long that I was able to think, wow, this is taking long, I should be timing this. I then looked for an online stopwatch, decided between 2 or 3, loaded it up, dragged it onto the screen, and got it started at about the halfway point. That's how slow it is. Then there's more basic stuff, like when pressing Ctrl+A, assuming it would select all the elements in the preview window. No, it selects all the UI text elements. That's just weird. So yeah, this is fine if you want to do the absolute most basic engraves, but anything even slightly complex, this software just isn't there yet. But then there's the phone software. It's Android only for a start, extremely limited, but this is the only way to connect to the machine using Wi-Fi, and it's a direct connection too, phone to P3. No adding this to your network to access it remotely. I genuinely need to know if anyone would even consider using an expensive laser this way. That's a serious question. Overall though, and again if you're new here, the way I tend to approach reviews is pick as many nits as I can and you decide if you can put up with them. Yes, functionally this works. When it comes to what I understand standard lasers to be, this is par for the course. The barrier to entry is twofold. One is LightBurn. You're going to need to learn it, and honestly, it's not that hard. The second is laser focusing. Now, you may or may not know that your laser needs to be the correct distance from the material it's engraving or cutting to get a sharp line. We touched on this earlier. And because this machine has no Z-axis mechanism, it's controlled manually. Each laser has a level on the side which drops down. Place this on top of your material and secure the laser head in place with 2 bolts, and that should be the correct distance, give or take a millimeter or 2. Unfortunately, a millimeter or 2 can make a big difference with lasers. And you do need to be careful with this. Make sure you manually raise and lower the laser until the bracket is just touching the material. Because if you just leave the laser loose with this notch just pressing on the material, its own weight will actually push it down and flex the honeycomb plate below it. So as soon as you move the lever out of the way, the material will flex back up, giving it the wrong focal distance, which has personally been one of the most frustrating cruxes of this machine. But I have to appreciate that this is still better than older lasers. But I can't ignore the fact that there are other machines out there with more precision control. So whilst I'm not a seasoned laser pro, and many experienced users will probably look at this as a handy feature versus what has come before, yeah, we have other machines on the market where the Z distance is more controllable and the focus is more clearly measurable. And that is probably why I personally wouldn't come back to this one as often as one that is more automated. There's just so much manual setup required per job that I don't need to deal with anymore on other machines. That's why I started getting into lasers, because they made this stuff easy, and here it's not so easy. I'm new to this. I'm constantly second guessing myself. Is this in focus, or could it be better? On other machines, I just have more trust that it's bang on. Now, finally, on safety. We've talked about this emergency stop, but this is also advertised as a Class 1 laser device, at least on the page for the 48 watt unit anyway, meaning under normal operation, it's safe to use. And normal operation means the lid is closed. And I do have an open question regarding the 2-in-1 unit and whether or not that shielding is adequate for the IR laser. Now they do provide you with glasses, but without CE markings or an OD rating. I'll do what many of my commenters have previously suggested and consider these as trash that I won't use in lieu of my own that I trust. I've got a separate video on optical safety that you really should check out if you're even thinking of using a laser, and I'll make a pop-up link above and drop another link in the description. The one question I do have is, because I noticed this when I was sat at my desk and I could see a glow at eye level, the bottom of the unit, including the honeycomb plate, does just slide out of the machine as a drawer, which is handy when cleaning off cut material. But the fact that the laser light can escape from here, I worry does pose enough risk to make me wonder who exactly verified this machine as a Class 1 laser device. But I am someone who is perhaps overly concerned about laser safety. I have reached out to Acmer and they have sent me a safety certificate confirming this is a Class 1 device. But in summary, and to conclude on this, overall I'd say this is fine, it's decent. It's not, oh wow, but it is a budget device. And what I like is that Acmer aren't really overinflating this to be some magic wonder device either. For the most part, it does what it says on the tin. There is some marketing hyperbole suggesting that it's just as easy to be creative on your phone is, I've got to be honest, a joke. And is this really the world's first diode and integrated dual laser with IR2? Because I've tested several lasers before this, and the majority are both diode and IR in one module. Again, serious question, but even if this is a world first, cool. But does it matter if the world already caught up? Overall, look, this is a decent sized machine with a versatile array of options, from the 10 watt 2-in-1 laser all the way up to 48 watt, then you've got the rotary module and most impressively the conveyor. There's a lot to love here. But on the other side of the coin, focusing is very manual and analog, and dare I say the software side of things is swiftly becoming a bit legacy when compared to competitors. Okay, perhaps legacy is an overstatement, standard would be another way to look at it. But the point is, if you're after a laser that's going to hold your hand so you can just get on with jobs, this isn't currently the one. You will be tweaking and testing quite often. If Acmer really want to push into the casual or hobbyist markets, they've got a lot of work to do on their own app. But again, if you don't mind the config or even expect the extra work, perhaps you're a fan of measure twice, cut once, there's an absolute ton to love here, especially for the price. I want to say thanks for watching, with the biggest thanks going to our members who are on screen now. Please consider signing up as a member. You can get your name in lights, Discord roles, early access, and some exclusive videos. If you do decide on picking this up and this video was helpful, at least to help you expect what you're going to get when you get it, then I'd appreciate you using my affiliate link in the description or first comment before you make your purchase. Until next time, ET Phone Home. Fohammer out.